York City, a wealthy but lonely businessman, Jason, stumbles upon Lily, a young mother fleeing from a dangerous past, with her little girl Emma in tow. Moved by her desperation, he offers them a place to stay, unaware that this single act of kindness will change all of their lives forever. As Lily's abusive ex, Nick, resurfaces, a tense custody battle and lingering threats put Jason and Lily's newfound connection to the test. Together, they must face their fears and confront the shadows of the past, while discovering the possibility of love neither of them expected. Will they be able to build a future free from fear, or will Nick's presence tear them apart for good? If this story of unexpected hope, danger, and second chances has you hooked, drop a comment with your thoughts and subscribe for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Jason Miller's days always began the same way, alone. He cherished the early morning silence in the heart of Manhattan before the city's pulse quickened with the usual chaos. By 5:30 a.m., he was already out of his high-rise apartment, jogging through Central Park, his mind drifting through the deals and deadlines that defined his life. But this morning felt different. He parked his silver Mercedes near the park's edge and set off on his usual route, enjoying the quiet stretch of tree-lined paths. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the park's manicured lawns, and the city skyline loomed in the distance like a sleeping giant. As Jason rounded a bend, he heard something that pulled him out of his thoughts. A soft, muffled sob. He slowed, glancing around for the source, until he spotted a woman sitting on a bench beneath a large oak tree. She held a small child close to her chest, her shoulders shaking as she tried to stifle her cries. Jason hesitated, his instinct telling him to keep moving, to not get involved. But something in the scene pulled at him, something raw and unguarded that he hadn't felt in a long time. Before he could second-guess himself, he changed direction and approached the bench, clearing his throat to announce his presence. "Excuse me," he said, his voice gentle. "Are you okay? Is there something I can do?" The woman looked up, her eyes red and swollen. She was young, mid-20s maybe, with dark hair that framed a face marked by exhaustion. She pulled her child closer, a little girl no older than 2, who peered out from her mother's arms with wide, curious eyes. "We're fine," the woman said quickly, though her voice wavered. "I'm sorry if we disturbed you." Jason shook his head. "No, it's not that. He gestured vaguely, feeling awkward under her wary gaze. "I couldn't walk by without checking. Do you need help?" The woman bit her lip, glancing away as if weighing whether to trust him. Jason could see the hesitation in her eyes, the way she clutched the child as though she might vanish at any moment. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. "I don't have anywhere to go. My name's Lily. This is Emma." Jason nodded slowly, a knot forming in his chest as he took in the scene. Lily's worn suitcase, the dark circles under her eyes, the way she seemed to be holding herself together by a thread. "I'm Jason," he said. "Listen, I know you don't know me, but if you need somewhere safe to stay, I have an empty apartment nearby. It's not much, but you'd have a roof over your head for a little while." Lily looked at him in disbelief, clutching Emma tighter. "Why would you do that? You don't even know us." Jason hesitated, realizing he didn't have a simple answer. "Maybe it's because I know what it's like to feel alone," he admitted quietly. "And I don't like seeing people struggle when I can help. No strings attached, just a safe place for you and your daughter until you figure out your next steps." Lily studied him for a long moment, and whatever she saw in his expression seemed to soften her guarded stance. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she whispered. "Just for a little while." Jason drove them to the vacant apartment, a modest space he owned in a quiet building on the Upper East Side. He helped Lily carry her few belongings up the stairs, trying to keep his tone casual as they made their way to the apartment door. "It's not fancy, but it's clean and quiet," he said, unlocking the door and stepping aside to let Lily enter first. "You'll have some privacy, and there's a spare room where you and Emma can sleep." Lily stepped inside, cradling Emma in her arms, her gaze sweeping over the small but tidy living space. It had the bare essentials, furniture, a stocked kitchen, clean linens. And for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope that she might actually be able to catch her breath. "It's perfect," she said softly, setting Emma down on the floor where the little girl immediately toddled over to explore the couch cushions. Lily turned back to Jason, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. "Thank you. I don't know what we would have done if—" Jason held up a hand, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "You don't have to thank me. Just get some rest. I'll leave my number on the fridge, and you can call if you need anything." He turned to go, but Lily stopped him with a quiet, "Wait." When he glanced back, she seemed to hesitate before speaking again. "Why did you really do this? You don't owe us anything." Jason considered her question, running a hand through his hair. "I guess. I've spent a lot of time focusing on work, on making money, building my business. But somewhere along the way, I think I lost sight of what matters. Maybe this is my way of finding it again." Lily nodded, and for the first time she offered him a tentative smile. "Well, whatever your reason, it means more than you know." Jason left the apartment, feeling a strange warmth in his chest as he walked back to his car. He didn't know what had compelled him to offer Lily a place to stay, but as he drove back to his empty penthouse, he realized that the silence didn't feel quite as comforting as it used to. A week passed, and Jason fell into a new routine, bringing groceries to Lily and Emma, checking on them during his evening jogs. Each time Lily seemed a little more relaxed, though she never quite lost the haunted look in her eyes. Emma, on the other hand, grew more playful each day, lighting up whenever Jason entered the room. Lily slowly began to open up about her past, sharing bits and pieces over cups of coffee. She told Jason about how she had met Nick, how charming he had seemed at first, how his love had turned controlling and violent once Emma was born. She spoke of the night she fled, clutching Emma in her arms, running through the darkness with only a few dollars in her pocket. "It's hard to believe I let it go on for so long," Lily confessed one evening, her voice barely more than a whisper. "But I kept thinking things would change, that he'd be better if I just tried harder. And then one night, I realized he wasn't going to change, and I had to leave before he hurt Emma." Jason's chest tightened at the pain in her voice. "You did the right thing, Lily. Leaving took a lot of strength." Lily gave a bitter laugh, looking down at her hands. "Sometimes I think I'm just fooling myself thinking I'm strong. I'm terrified, Jason. Every time I hear footsteps outside the door, I think it's him coming to take us back." Jason reached across the table, placing a hand over hers. "You're not alone anymore," he said, his voice firm. "I promise you, he won't hurt you or Emma again." It had been 2 weeks since Lily and Emma moved into Jason's spare apartment, and Lily was beginning to settle into a tentative rhythm, cooking meals, taking Emma to the nearby playground, even daring to sketch while her daughter napped. She had started to smile more often, a small but hopeful change that Jason noticed each time he visited. But one afternoon, as Lily returned from a walk with Emma, she found an envelope slipped under the door. The sight of her name scrawled in messy handwriting sent a chill down her spine. With trembling hands, she opened it and found a note inside. "You can't hide from me forever, Lily. I'll find you." Her breath hitched as she scanned the words over and over, the terror clawing its way up her chest. She glanced around the empty hallway, as if expecting Nick to appear out of the shadows, and quickly bolted the door behind her. When Jason arrived later that evening with groceries, he found Lily pale and shaking, clutching the note like it might slip through her fingers. "Jason," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He knows where we are." Jason took the note from her, reading it quickly before a look of anger crossed his face. "It's just a scare tactic, Lily. He's trying to intimidate you. But we're not going to let him win." He dialed his lawyer, Greg Bennett, explaining the situation as calmly as he could. though his hands shook with barely contained rage. Greg agreed to meet them at the apartment the next morning, promising to get the police involved. As he hung up, Jason turned to Lily, his expression softening. "We'll get through this. I'm not going to let him hurt you or Emma." Lily managed a shaky nod, but as she looked down at Emma playing on the floor, the fear tightened around her heart. She knew Jason wanted to protect them, but she couldn't help wondering if she'd ever truly be free of the shadow Nick cast over her life. The following morning, Greg arrived at the apartment with a police officer, Officer Reed, who took the note into evidence. "This is considered a violation of the restraining order," she said firmly, jotting down notes in her report. "But we'll need more evidence to press charges. Keep a record of any further contact." Lily nodded, clutching Emma tightly as the officer left. Greg remained behind to discuss their options, reviewing the restraining order and suggesting additional steps. "You should install cameras outside the apartment," he advised, "and consider moving again if you feel unsafe." Jason, who had been pacing the small living room, turned to Lily with a determined look. "We're not letting him scare us out of here. We'll do whatever it takes to keep you and Emma safe." Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she felt the weight of Jason's unwavering support settle into her chest, but a small part of her couldn't ignore the guilt that came with relying on him so heavily. She had promised herself she wouldn't drag anyone else into her mess, and yet here Jason was, risking his peace for her sake. "I don't want you to put yourself in danger because of us," she said quietly as Greg left, her hands twisting in her lap. "You shouldn't have to do this." Jason knelt down in front of her, his expression gentle but resolute. "Lily, I'm not doing this because I have to. I'm doing it because I want to. You and Emma are worth fighting for." Lily stared at him, her breath catching at the sincerity in his voice. She felt something stir in her heart, something she hadn't let herself feel in years. But she pushed the thought away, reminding herself that this wasn't the time for dreams or wishes. She had to focus on keeping her daughter safe, no matter what it cost. The next few weeks passed in a blur of tightened security and heightened vigilance. Jason arranged for security cameras to be installed around the building, and he took to staying at Lily's apartment more often, sleeping on the couch to keep watch. He worked remotely when he could, balancing phone calls and paperwork with playing with Emma, who had become increasingly attached to him. Lily watched the bond forming between them, feeling a mixture of gratitude and a pang of something deeper, something she wasn't sure she could name. She knew that Jason had become more than a protector. He had become a part of their small family, even if she was too afraid to admit it out loud. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Lily found herself sitting with Jason at the kitchen table, sharing a cup of tea. The silence between them was comfortable, and Lily felt the weight of the day's tension slowly melting away. "You didn't have to give up so much of your time for us," Lily said softly, glancing at Jason over the rim of her cup. "You have your own life, your own work. I'm sure you didn't plan on spending your evenings babysitting and setting up security systems." Jason chuckled, but his expression softened. "You're right, I didn't plan on it. But honestly, it feels good to have something real to come home to. For a long time, my life was just numbers and clients. I thought that's all I wanted." He hesitated, glancing down at his cup. "But then I met you and Emma, and I realized I'd been missing something I didn't even know I needed." Lily's breath caught, and she felt her heart twist with a mix of hope and fear. She set down her cup, staring into the steam that rose between them. "Jason, I'm scared. I'm scared of letting myself believe that things could be different, that we could be safe." Jason reached across the table, taking her hand in his touch warm and steady. "I can't promise that everything will be perfect," he said quietly. "But I promise you won't have to face it alone." Lily squeezed his hand, blinking back the tears that pricked at her eyes. For the first time, she allowed herself to lean into his support, letting the comfort of his presence wash over her. And in that moment, she felt the first fragile glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a future beyond fear. One afternoon, as they were discussing the legal case with Greg, the lawyer brought up a new concern. Nick's lawyers are arguing that Lily's living situation is unstable, Greg explained, glancing between Jason and Lily. They're trying to use it as leverage in their custody challenge. If you want to strengthen your case, a more formal arrangement between the two of you could help, like marriage. Lily's heart skipped a beat, and she turned to Jason, her mind reeling. Marriage? She repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. We're not. I mean, it's not like that between us. Jason hesitated, his expression thoughtful. It's not about romance, Lily, he said carefully. It's about making sure you and Emma are protected. If being married can help us win this case, then I think we should consider it. Lily felt her hands trembling, and she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to steady her breathing. The idea of marrying Jason, even for practical reasons, sent her thoughts spiraling. But she knew he was right. Nick would use any advantage he could find, and this might be their best chance. After a long silence, she nodded slowly, meeting Jason's steady gaze. Okay, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. If you're sure this is what you want, then I'll do it. A week later, they stood in a small courthouse, exchanging vows in front of a judge. The ceremony was brief, with Greg as their witness, and Emma sitting in a stroller nearby. As they slipped rings onto each other's fingers, Jason caught Lily's eye, offering her a small, reassuring smile. It's just a piece of paper, he murmured, his voice barely audible over the judge's words. But it's a promise, too. We're in this together, Lily. She nodded, trying to hold back the emotions that welled up inside her. And as they signed the marriage certificate, she found herself wondering if it was possible to build a real future on a promise that had started out as a practical arrangement. The first court date came sooner than Lily had hoped. She had spent sleepless nights going over every possible scenario in her head, but no amount of preparation could chase away the knots of anxiety that tightened around her chest as she walked into the courthouse with Jason and Greg. Lily held Emma tightly, the little girl's head resting on her shoulder, while Jason walked beside them, his hand a steadying presence on her back. The courthouse loomed ahead, gray and foreboding, and Lily's steps faltered as memories of Nick's threats flooded her mind. Jason leaned in, his voice a low murmur in her ear. We've got this, Lily. Just remember, you're not alone anymore. She nodded, forcing herself to take a deep breath. She focused on the warmth of Emma's small hands clinging to her, the solid presence of Jason beside her, and found the strength to walk through the courthouse doors. Inside, they met with Greg, who reviewed their case once more, going over the key points they would raise. Lily, your testimony is crucial, Greg reminded her. But don't worry about the technical details. Just speak from your heart about what you've done to protect Emma. Jason, you'll support her case by showing that you've provided a stable environment for them. Jason nodded, his expression focused. I won't let them twist her story, he said firmly, glancing at Lily. We'll show the court what kind of man Nick really is. Lily managed a small, shaky smile. Thank you, she whispered. Both of you. They entered the courtroom, and Lily's breath caught when she saw Nick at the other end of the room, his expression cold and calculating as he glanced over at them. He was dressed sharply. His appearance was a stark contrast to the dark memories Lily carried. But the look in his eyes was as cruel as ever, and she felt a shiver running down her spine. Jason's hand tightened around hers, grounding her. She squeezed back, drawing strength from his presence, and prepared herself for the battle ahead. The custody hearing began, and Nick's lawyer wasted no time trying to paint Lily as an unstable mother, focusing on the months she spent living in shelters before Jason offered her a place to stay. Nick sat with a self-satisfied smirk, as if he believed he had already won. Lily's hands shook as she took the witness stand, but she drew a deep breath, meeting the judge's eyes. "I left because I was afraid for my daughter's safety," she said, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "Nick hurt me, and I couldn't let him hurt Emma. I did whatever I had to do to keep her safe." Nick's lawyer tried to undermine her story, asking why she hadn't gone to the police sooner, implying that she had exaggerated the danger. But Lily stood her ground, recounting the nights when Nick's temper had boiled over, the bruises she had hidden, the threats he had made when she tried to leave. Jason watched her, his heart aching at the pain in her voice. But he felt a swell of pride, too. Pride in her strength, in the way she refused to let Nick's lies define her. When it was his turn to take the stand, he spoke with a quiet, unwavering conviction. "I met Lily and Emma when they had nowhere else to go," he said, glancing over at them. "I offered them a place to stay, but I didn't expect to find a family. Lily is a loving mother who has fought tooth and nail for her daughter's safety, and I'm proud to stand beside her." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Emma deserves to grow up in a home where she doesn't have to live in fear. And that's what we're offering her." As he stepped down, he caught Lily's eye, and she managed a small smile, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She mouthed a silent thank you, and Jason felt warmth spread through his chest, stronger than the fear and tension that filled the courtroom. The hearing adjourned for the day, and Jason drove Lily and Emma back to the apartment, the silence between them heavy with unspoken thoughts. When they arrived home, Lily put Emma down for a nap, then joined Jason in the kitchen, where he was making tea. Lily sat at the table, her hands twisting together. "I hate that he's doing this," she said finally, her voice raw with frustration. "Trying to take Emma away from me, trying to make me out to be some kind of failure." Jason set down the kettle, coming over to kneel in front of her. "You're not a failure, Lily. You're the strongest person I know, and we're going to win this." She looked down at him, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You shouldn't have to be part of this, Jason. I dragged you into a mess that isn't yours." Jason reached up, gently brushing away her tear with his thumb. "This isn't a mess to me, Lily. It's our life, our family. I wouldn't change that for anything." Lily's breath caught at his words, and she felt something shift inside her, a realization that this man, who had started as a stranger in a park, had become the person she trusted more than anyone. The thought filled her with hope, but also fear. Fear that she might lose him, that she might not be able to protect him from the storm that Nick had brought into their lives. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "I'm scared, Jason," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm scared of losing everything again." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly, his voice a low murmur against her hair. "I'm scared too, Lily. But I'm not going anywhere. No matter what happens, I'm staying right here with you and Emma." For a moment, they stayed like that, holding each other in the quiet kitchen, finding strength in the simple act of being close. And as Lily clung to him, she felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could survive this together. The day of the final verdict arrived, and the air in the courtroom was thick with tension. Lily sat beside Jason, her hand tightly wrapped around his, her mind racing with prayers that the judge would see the truth, that he would see through Nick's lies and give her the chance to protect her daughter. When the judge finally spoke, his voice echoed through the quiet room, each word carrying a weight that settled into Lily's chest. After reviewing all evidence, the court grants full custody of Emma Evans to her mother, Lily Evans, and extends the restraining order against Nicholas Evans indefinitely. Lily's breath caught, and for a moment the world seemed to blur around her. She felt Jason's hand squeeze hers, heard the sound of Greg's relieved sigh, but all she could focus on was the realization that Emma was safe, that they had won. As the courtroom emptied, Jason pulled her into a hug, his voice rough with emotion. "You did it, Lily. You did it." She buried her face in his shoulder, clinging to him as relief and joy flooded her senses. "We did it," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "You, me, and Emma. We did it." The courtroom victory felt like a dream to Lily, one that she was afraid to wake up from. She had won full custody of Emma, secured a protective order against Nick, and had a place she could call home with Jason. Yet, as she sat in their small kitchen that morning, watching Emma play with a stack of blocks, she couldn't shake the feeling that something could still go wrong. Jason placed a mug of tea in front of her and sat down across the table, his hand reaching out to cover hers. "You're quiet this morning," he said gently, studying her face. "Are you okay?" Lily glanced up at him, trying to find the right words. "I should feel relieved, shouldn't I?" she said softly. "But I keep thinking, what if this peace doesn't last? What if he finds a way to come back?" Jason's expression softened, and he squeezed her hand, his touch grounding her. "Lily, I won't let him hurt you again. We're not the same people we were when this started. You fought so hard for Emma and for yourself. We won't lose that." She looked down at their joined hands, feeling a lump form in her throat. Jason's faith in her was unyielding, a constant that she hadn't realized she needed so desperately. But the fear of losing him, of dragging him into a life of uncertainty, still lingered. "I don't want to be the reason you have to keep looking over your shoulder," she whispered. "You didn't sign up for a life of danger and fear." Jason reached out, gently lifting her chin so she would meet his gaze. "I signed up for you, Lily, and for Emma. You're my family now, and I'm not going anywhere." She swallowed hard, her chest tightening with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something that felt dangerously close to love. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. Jason's smile was gentle, his eyes warm as he held her gaze. "Well, lucky for you, you don't have to find out." Days turned into weeks, and the shadow of the custody battle slowly began to fade, replaced by the rhythms of everyday life. Jason returned to his work, though he made sure to be home early each evening, sharing dinner with Lily and Emma and listening to the stories of their day. Lily, for her part, started to focus on her art again, using Jason's encouragement as fuel to reignite her old passion. One afternoon, Jason surprised Lily with a visit to a local art supply store, leading her through aisles of paints and brushes. Lily's eyes widened as she took in the colors and canvases, her fingers grazing over the textures she had missed so much. "I thought you might like to start painting again," Jason said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "You've been through so much. Maybe it's time to do something for yourself." Lily blinked back tears, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Jason, I don't know what to say. It's been so long since I let myself even think about painting. I almost forgot how much I loved it." Jason reached out, taking her hand in his. "You deserve to have that back. You deserve to be happy, Lily." She looked at him, feeling a warmth spread through her chest, and for a moment, she let herself imagine what it would be like to build a future with him, to let go of fear and believe that she was worthy of love. And as they left the store with bags full of supplies, she felt a small, fragile hope take root inside her. Lily began to find her footing in her new life, spending hours painting while Emma napped, creating pieces filled with light and color that reflected the hope she was starting to feel. Jason watched her transformation with a sense of awe, seeing the way she reclaimed a part of herself that she had thought was lost. But even as they built new routines, the past lingered like a shadow at the edges of their lives. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Jason reading while Lily sketched, the doorbell rang, sending a jolt of unease through both of them. Jason rose, glancing at Lily with a reassuring smile before heading to the door. But when he opened it, he found a plain, unmarked envelope waiting on the doorstep. There was no return address, no sign of who might have left it. He returned to the living room, holding the envelope in his hands, his expression turning serious. "Lily, someone left this outside the door. Do you recognize it?" Lily's face went pale as she took the envelope, tearing it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a single photograph, one of her and Jason walking with Emma in the park, taken from a distance. Beneath the image, scrawled in black ink, were the words, "You can't hide forever." The room seemed to tilt, and Lily's breath came in sharp, panicked gasps. Jason quickly wrapped an arm around her, steadying her as he took the photo from her hands. "He's still watching us," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's never going to stop, is he?" Jason clenched his jaw, anger flashing in his eyes. "Lily, listen to me. We're going to the police and we're going to show them this. He doesn't have the right to control your life anymore, and I'm not going to let him get away with this." She clung to him, her body shaking with fear, but she nodded, knowing that he was right. She had fought too hard to let Nick drag her back into the darkness. But even as she tried to draw strength from Jason's presence, a cold knot of fear settled in her chest, a reminder that the past wasn't done with them yet. The next morning, they met with Officer Reed at the police station, handing over the photograph and recounting the recent threats. The officer's expression turned grim as she reviewed the evidence. "This is clearly a violation of the restraining order," she said, jotting down notes. "We'll increase patrols in your area and keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. But I need you to stay vigilant." Jason nodded, his hand resting protectively on Lily's back. "Thank you, officer. We'll do whatever it takes to keep Lily and Emma safe." As they left the station, Lily felt a small spark of hope, but it was overshadowed by the lingering dread that Nick's presence cast over their lives. She glanced over at Jason, seeing the tightness in his jaw, the way his hands clenched into fists at his sides, and she realized how deeply he was affected by this threat, how much he had come to care about her and Emma. That night, as they put Emma to bed, Jason pulled Lily aside in the hallway, his expression serious. "Lily, I know this is terrifying, but I want you to know that we're not facing this alone. I've got friends in the city, people who can help us if things get worse." She looked up at him, searching his face, and saw determination in his eyes. It struck her then how much he had sacrificed for them, how much he had put on the line without ever asking for anything in return. "Why are you doing all of this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why do you care so much?" Jason hesitated, then reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Because I care about you, Lily, and because somewhere along the way, I fell in love with the idea of a life that includes you and Emma. I know it's complicated, and I know it's not perfect, but it's real." Lily's breath caught, and she felt a wave of emotion rise up inside her. Gratitude, fear, and something dangerously close to hope. She reached up, cupping his face in her hands, and for a moment, she let herself believe that they might have a chance at a future beyond the shadows. I think I'm falling for you too," she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "But I'm scared, Jason. I'm scared of needing you too much." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers, his voice low and steady. "Then let's be scared together, Lily, because I'm not going anywhere." The following days passed in a haze of unease. Officer Reed kept her word. Patrol cars made regular passes by the building, and Jason upgraded the apartment's security system yet again, but Lily couldn't shake the feeling that Nick's presence was lurking just out of sight. One afternoon, while Jason was at work, Lily decided to take Emma for a walk in the nearby park. The fresh air usually helped to calm her nerves, and she hoped it would do the same today. She kept a wary eye on her surroundings, her pulse quickening at every unfamiliar face. As she pushed Emma's stroller along a path lined with cherry blossoms, Lily spotted a man standing near the playground, his face partially hidden by a baseball cap. He didn't look directly at her, but her instincts flared, sending a chill down her spine. Was it Nick? Or was her mind playing tricks on her? Her grip tightened around the stroller handle, and she turned sharply, heading back toward the apartment without looking back. She hurried Emma inside and bolted the door behind her, trying to steady her breathing. She knew she couldn't keep living like this, jumping at shadows, letting fear dictate her every move. But as the hours ticked by and the shadows deepened outside, the memory of that man in the park lingered in her mind. She didn't tell Jason about it that night, not wanting to add to his burden, but the image haunted her as she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The next morning, Jason noticed the strain in Lily's expression as she sipped her coffee, her hands wrapped tightly around the mug. He reached across the table, touching her arm gently. "You're still thinking about the photo, aren't you?" Lily hesitated, then nodded. "I just feel like I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. I don't want to keep being afraid, but I don't know how to stop." Jason's jaw tightened, and he leaned closer, his voice filled with frustration. "You shouldn't have to live like this. I'm going to talk to Greg and see if there's any way we can push for further legal action against Nick. Maybe we can find a way to press charges with the new evidence." Lily nodded, though a part of her doubted that it would be enough. She knew how slippery Nick could be, how easily he manipulated the system to stay just out of reach. But she tried to draw strength from Jason's determination, letting him take her hand and pull her out of her dark thoughts. Later that day, as Jason was on the phone with Greg in the living room, Lily heard a soft sound outside the door, a scrape of something against the wood. She froze, her heart leaping into her throat, and crept closer to the door to listen. There was a muffled voice on the other side, a man's voice. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent a spike of terror through her. She turned quickly, motioning to Jason, her eyes wide with fear. Jason hung up the phone immediately and hurried over to her. "What is it?" "There's someone outside," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. I think it might be him." Jason's expression hardened, and he stepped closer to the door, listening intently. But by the time he reached for the doorknob, the sound had stopped, leaving only silence behind. Jason glanced through the peephole but saw no one in the hallway. He turned back to Lily, his hand resting on her shoulder. "It's okay, he's gone. But we're going to call the police. If he's trying to get into the building again, they need to know." Lily nodded, but even as she dialed Officer Reed's number, a sense of dread settled in her stomach. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time, that Nick's next move would be the one that changed everything. A week later, just when the tension seemed almost unbearable, Jason and Lily returned home from a late dinner, one of their rare attempts to find normalcy. As they stepped out of the elevator into the dimly lit hallway, Jason paused, his senses prickling. He spotted the door to their apartment ajar, the lock hanging loose. A chill ran through him and he reached out, holding Lily back with one arm. "Stay here," he whispered urgently, his voice barely audible. "Something's wrong." Before Lily could protest, Jason stepped forward, pushing the door open with a creak. He scanned the darkened apartment, the shadows seeming deeper and more threatening than before. He moved carefully toward the kitchen, his heart thudding in his chest. Lily's pulse quickened as she hovered by the doorway, clutching her phone in her hand, ready to dial 911. She listened to the sounds of Jason moving through the apartment, but suddenly she heard another voice, low, mocking, tinged with a familiarity that made her blood run cold. "Well, look who's finally home." She froze, her breath catching in her throat. It was Nick. Before she could think, Jason's voice rang out, sharp with anger. "Get out of here, Nick. The police are on their way. If you know what's good for you, you'll leave right now." Nick laughed, the sound cold and bitter. "You think I'm afraid of the police? You think a piece of paper is going to keep me away from my family?" Lily's hands shook as she fumbled to call the police, her voice barely steady as she whispered the address into the phone. She forced herself to step into the apartment, her legs trembling beneath her, and she found Jason standing between her and Nick, his stance protective. Nick's expression twisted into a sneer as he saw Lily, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous light. "There you are, Lily, hiding behind your new boyfriend, thinking he can keep you safe. You always were good at finding someone else to fight your battles." Lily felt her fear turn to anger, the words cutting through the years of trauma he had inflicted on her. "You don't get to talk to me like that anymore, Nick," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "I'm not afraid of you, not anymore." Nick's expression darkened, and he took a step closer, but Jason moved to block him, his fists clenched at his sides. "You need to leave now," Jason said, his voice low and furious. "Lily's moved on, and you're not part of her life anymore." Nick's face twisted with rage, and for a moment, it seemed like he might lunge at Jason, but then the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder as they approached the building. Nick hesitated, his eyes flicking toward the window, and Jason used the moment to push him back, sending him stumbling toward the door. Nick shot a hateful glare at Jason, then back at Lily, his voice dripping with venom. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You'll never be rid of me." But as the police stormed into the building, guns drawn and flashlights sweeping through the hallway, Nick's bravado faltered. He tried to make a break for the stairs, but Officer Reed caught up to him, slamming him against the wall and snapping handcuffs around his wrists. Lily stood frozen in the doorway, watching as the officers dragged Nick out of the apartment. It felt like a surreal dream, the tension that had wound around her chest finally beginning to loosen. Jason came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her trembling form, holding her tightly. "It's over, Lily," he whispered into her hair, his voice rough with emotion. "You're safe now." She clung to him, burying her face on his shoulder as tears slipped down her cheeks. She knew that the memories would take time to heal, that there were wounds that would never fully fade, but in that moment, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could start to build a life free from fear. The next morning dawned clear and bright, casting long rays of sunlight through the windows of the apartment. Jason and Lily sat at the kitchen table, their hands wrapped around steaming mugs of coffee, the tension of the previous night still lingering in the air. Lily glanced over at Jason, studying the lines of exhaustion on his face. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice breaking the quiet. "For everything you've done for us. For me." Jason reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You don't have to thank me, Lily. I told you before, I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here, with you and Emma, for as long as you'll have me." She felt her heart swell with emotion, a warmth spreading through her chest as she met his steady gaze. And in that moment, she realized that she didn't want to be without him, that she had found something worth fighting for in the life they had built together. She squeezed his hand, offering him a small, hopeful smile. "Then let's make a real start, Jason. Let's build a life that belongs to us, not to the past." Jason's smile grew, the shadows in his eyes lifting as he leaned closer, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I'd like that, Lily. I'd like that a lot." The apartment felt different in the days following Nick's arrest, quieter, lighter, as if the weight that had pressed down on their lives had finally lifted. Jason still insisted on keeping the security measures in place, but Lily could see the change in him too, the way his shoulders relaxed when he came home, the way he smiled more often when he saw Emma playing. For the first time, they could sit together in the living room, watching Emma chase after her toy car, and feel a sense of peace that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. But the shadows of the past lingered in subtle ways, a reminder that trauma didn't vanish with a police report. One evening, as they prepared dinner together in the kitchen, Lily caught herself flinching when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Jason noticed immediately, turning to her with a look of concern. "Lily, you're safe now," he said gently, resting a hand on her shoulder. "He's not coming back." She nodded, forcing a smile, but she could feel the old fear gnawing at the edges of her mind. "I know," she whispered, stirring the pot on the stove. "It's just hard to forget. He made me feel like I'd never be free." Jason's expression softened, and he reached out, turning her gently so she faced him. "You are free, Lily, and you don't have to rush. Healing takes time, and I'm here for every step of it." Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she leaned into his embrace, letting herself feel the warmth of his arms around her. For so long, she had carried the burden of fear and survival alone. But now, she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry it by herself anymore. As the days turned into weeks, Lily began to focus on rebuilding her life, one small step at a time. She started painting again, turning the spare room into a studio filled with the smell of fresh canvas and bright splashes of color. Jason made sure she had the time she needed, taking Emma out for walks in the park or trips to the library, giving Lily the space to reclaim her creativity. One evening, Jason returned home to find Lily standing in the makeshift studio, surrounded by finished canvases. The paintings were vibrant and filled with life, scenes of sunlight filtering through trees, of oceans stretching beyond the horizon. They were a world away from the darkness she had once lived in. Jason's breath caught as he took in the paintings. "Lily, these are incredible. You've got so much talent." Lily blushed, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I'm still rusty, but it feels good to create again. It makes me feel like I'm taking back a part of myself." Jason stepped closer, his voice soft with admiration. "You've always had that part, Lily. It's just shining through again." She looked up at him, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "You make me feel like I can be myself again," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like I can dream about the future." Jason smiled, reaching out to brush his thumb across her cheek. "Then let's dream together," he said. "We could do anything, maybe even set up an art show for you one day." Lily laughed, a sound filled with hope and disbelief. "An art show? You think anyone would come?" Jason's eyes twinkled as he leaned in closer. "I'd be your first customer," he teased, and for a moment it felt like the world was filled with endless possibilities. One afternoon, Jason surprised Lily by taking her and Emma to a small neighborhood restaurant they had never been to before. It was a simple place with warm lighting and cozy booths, but Lily could feel that there was something different about this night. Something special. As they settled into their booth, Jason reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small, gift-wrapped box. He placed it on the table in front of Lily, his expression serious but warm. "I've been wanting to give you this for a while," he said, pushing the box toward her. Lily stared at the box, her hands trembling as she picked it up and slowly unwrapped it. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, a charm shaped like a little bird dangling from the chain. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked up at Jason, feeling the emotions rising in her chest. "It's beautiful, Jason," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But why?" Jason reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Because you remind me of that little bird," he said softly. "You've been through so much, but you've found a way to fly again. And I wanted you to have something to remind you that you're free." Lily felt tears spill down her cheeks, and she squeezed his hand tightly, struggling to find the words for everything she felt in that moment. Gratitude, hope, and a love that had grown slowly but deeply, taking root in the quiet moments they had shared. "Thank you, Jason," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "For everything." He smiled, leaning across the table to brush a kiss against her forehead. "You don't have to thank me. Just promise me you'll keep dreaming. Keep believing in yourself." She nodded, slipping the bracelet onto her wrist, feeling its cool weight against her skin. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself imagine a life where fear wasn't the defining factor, where she could be herself, free and unafraid, surrounded by people who truly cared. As the weeks turned into months, Jason, Lily, and Emma settled into a new rhythm, one that wasn't dictated by fear. They took long walks through the city, explored new parks, and even visited an art gallery where Lily drew inspiration from the works on display. But one afternoon, as they walked along the river, Jason paused, turning to Lily with a contemplative expression. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, glancing down at Emma, who was toddling ahead of them. "We've come so far, but I want to take another step forward. I want to make this official." Lily frowned, confused. "Official?" Jason took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a simple but elegant ring, the diamond catching the light of the setting sun. Lily's breath caught as he knelt down on one knee, his eyes filled with love and sincerity. "I know we started this journey together for practical reasons," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "But I've fallen in love with you, Lily, and with Emma. You've given my life a purpose I never thought I'd find, and I don't want to just be your husband in name. I want to build a real life with you. Will you marry me? Truly, this time?" Lily felt her heart swell with joy, her eyes filling with tears as she looked down at the man who had become her anchor, her partner, her love. She reached out, cupping his face with her hands, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Jason," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and when he rose to kiss her, it was a kiss filled with all the promises they had made, promises of love, of hope, of a future where they could be truly happy. Emma clapped her hands, giggling at the sight of her mother's smile, and Jason scooped her up, twirling her in the air as Lily laughed beside them. As the sun set over the river, casting a warm glow over the city, Lily and Jason stood together, knowing that they had found something rare and beautiful, something that had grown out of pain and struggle, but had blossomed into a love that would carry them through whatever lay ahead. The days leading up to their official wedding felt like a blur of anticipation and joy. Lily had never thought she would plan another wedding, let alone one built on a foundation of love and trust. But with Jason by her side, the experience felt like a dream she hadn't dared to hope for. The ceremony was small, attended only by close friends and a few neighbors who had become like family. They held it in a nearby community garden, surrounded by flowers and the scent of spring, under the clear blue sky. Lily wore a simple white dress, and Jason stood beside her in a suit that matched his easy smile. As the ceremony began, Lily's heart pounded with a mix of nervousness and excitement. When the officiant asked Jason to say his vows, he took a deep breath, turning to face her with an expression filled with love. "Lily, when I met you, I didn't know that my life was about to change," Jason said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You brought light into a world that had become cold and empty, and you showed me what it means to truly love someone. You and Emma have become my world. Today I promise to be your partner, your protector, and your best friend, for as long as we both live." Lily blinked back tears, and when it was her turn, she reached out to take his hands, her voice filled with the gratitude and hope she had found in their journey together. "Jason, you saved me when I didn't think I could be saved. You taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was, and you made me believe that I deserve to be loved. I promise to cherish every moment we have, and to build a life with you and Emma that is filled with joy and laughter. Thank you for choosing me, and for letting me choose you." As they exchanged rings and sealed their vows with a kiss, the applause of their friends and neighbors filled the air. But to Lily and Jason, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. wrapped in the warmth of their promises. Lily glanced down at Emma, who was holding a basket of flower petals, beaming up at them with a smile that melted her heart. Jason knelt down to Emma's level, gently ruffling her hair. "Hey, little one," he said softly. "How would you like it if I asked you to be my daughter?" Emma giggled, not quite understanding the weight of the moment, but clearly delighted. Lily felt tears spill down her cheeks as Jason embraced Emma, and she knew, without a doubt, that they had found their way to something beautiful. As Jason, Lily, and Emma settled into their life as a family, the specter of Nick still lingered in the back of Lily's mind, a shadow that refused to fully fade. Even though he was in police custody and facing charges for breaking the restraining order, the memories of his threats and the fear he had instilled still surfaced in unexpected moments. When she heard a door slam too loudly, or when a stranger's voice echoed in the hallway, Jason noticed these moments, the way Lily would tense or her smile would falter, and he tried to be patient, offering comfort without pressing her too hard. But one night, as they sat together on the balcony, Lily decided she couldn't keep her fears hidden any longer. "I keep thinking he's going to come back," she admitted, staring out at the city lights, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I know it's not rational, but it's like there's a part of me that's still trapped in that fear." Jason reached out, taking her hand in his expression filled with understanding. "Lily, it's not irrational," he said quietly. "After everything you've been through, it's normal to have those fears. But I promise you, Nick doesn't have any power over you anymore. You've taken that back. And whatever it takes, I'll keep reminding you of that, every single day." Lily looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't want him to have that power anymore," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I want to be free of him, truly free. And I want to be the mother Emma deserves, the partner you deserve." Jason squeezed her hand gently. "You already are, Lily, and I'm here with you no matter how long it takes." They sat together in the quiet of the night, and Lily felt a small shift inside her, a decision to let go of the guilt and fear that had held her back. She knew the scars would never fully disappear, but with Jason beside her, she believed she could face whatever came next. As the months passed, Lily threw herself into her art, pouring her feelings and her hopes into each brushstroke. Jason encouraged her to reach out to local galleries, and to her surprise, one gallery owner agreed to showcase her work in a small exhibition. It was a chance she hadn't dared to dream of, and the thought of strangers seeing her art filled her with a nervous excitement. Jason, even her supporter, helped her prepare for the exhibition, even building custom frames for some of her larger pieces. On the night of the opening, they walked into the gallery together, Emma skipping happily between them, and Lily couldn't help but feel like she was walking into a new chapter of her life. The gallery was small but welcoming, and Lily's paintings filled the walls with color and emotion. As guests wandered through the space, Lily stayed close to Jason, overwhelmed by the positive reactions and the warmth of the community's support. Near the end of the night, a woman approached Lily, complimenting the depth and emotion in her work. "Your pieces, they feel so personal, like there's a story behind each one," she said, studying a painting of a woman standing beneath a sky full of stars. Lily smiled, glancing over at Jason, who was holding Emma in his arms as they looked at another painting together. "There is a story," she said softly. "It's a story about finding light in the darkest places and learning that love can grow even after everything has been taken from you." The woman nodded thoughtfully, offering Lily a warm smile. "Well, I think you've found your light," she said. "And it's beautiful." As the exhibition drew to a close, Lily found herself standing by the window, looking out at the city lights that had once felt so intimidating. Jason joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders and pulling her close. "Look at you," he whispered, his voice filled with pride. "You've created something amazing, Lily. I hope you're as proud of yourself as I am of you." Lily leaned into his warmth, resting her head against his shoulder. "I think I'm finally starting to believe it," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "And I think I'm finally ready to let go of the past." Jason kissed the top of her head, his own smile widening. "Then let's look forward to everything that's still ahead," he said, "because I think our best days are just beginning." A year after Nick's arrest, Lily, Jason, and Emma stood together in Central Park, the same place where their journey had begun. The autumn leaves fell around them, casting shades of red and gold across the ground, and the air was crisp with the promise of change. Jason spread out a blanket on the grass, and Emma ran ahead, chasing after the falling leaves with a joyful laugh. Lily watched her, a soft smile on her lips, as she took Jason's hand, their fingers intertwining. "It's strange, isn't it?" Lily mused, glancing around at the park that had once felt like a place of desperation. "How much has changed in a year?" Jason nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "A year ago, I couldn't have imagined being here like this," he admitted. "But I wouldn't trade this life for anything. Not after everything we've been through together." Lily turned to him, a deep warmth settling in her chest as she looked into his eyes. "Neither would I," she said softly. "You gave me back so much more than just a place to stay. You gave me a chance to believe in myself again, and you gave Emma a father who loves her." Jason's smile softened and he reached out to cup her face, his thumb brushing over her cheek. "You've given me just as much, Lily," he whispered. "You've given me a reason to dream again." As they stood together in the park, watching Emma dance among the leaves, Lily realized that they had built something beautiful out of the ruins of their past, something strong enough to weather any storm. And as she leaned into Jason's embrace, she knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. As Lily, Jason, and Emma walked hand in hand through the park, their story found its happy ending. But the journey of love, hope, and new beginnings is never truly over. If you've enjoyed this story and want to follow more heartfelt tales filled with emotion, healing, and the power of family, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Subscribe now for more stories that inspire and remind us that even in the darkest times, there's always a chance for a new beginning.